There are a lot of musicians who know how to do things but don't know how to describe what they're doing. I have the opposite problem, where I can describe pretty clearly what's going on when musicians think phenomenologically, and what follows is an analysis of what kinds of cognitive qualias present to people while they're playing music, and the role of music theory compared to the role of just attending to the sonic. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really useful. You might find it useful. And the bottom line is just go practice and play your instrument to keep unearthing what your perceptions actually do while you play. I wouldn't mind hearing what you're interested in learning because I see my role as being able to fill in the theory side of things in terms of what first person musician experience is like. Anything on the cognition side, just please ask and I'll try and answer. The thing to recognize is that conceptual thought or literal technical thought is usable in music, but it's not useful. And the difference is that when you're just thinking, what do I play? And you're worried about it and you're thinking about it in terms of a chord, you might struggle. You have to get directly to the contents of the sound. And then the technical aspect runs in the background. That's how it's useful, but not usable. So you have to get into these indirect kinds of knowing that are more perceptual. And it's really strange. Humans are able to think about things using sort of an interior vision or an audiation, and then enact those and respond with all the technical aspects completely in the background and just sort of use like a linear sonic. So what I'm talking about is whatever note you're playing now, the next ribbon of sound that you're going to produce, you can simulate in your head and kind of imagine and then do it. And it's a direct knowing where you're attending to the actual surface of the sonic or the actual gestalt, hefty. These are like entities in your cognition. You're attending to them directly and then you're exporting them. And you're doing this at a particular location in time. So you can't be too far ahead of yourself and you can't be too far backward in time. And then also what's tricky is sometimes ruptures will happen where you realize, I don't know, what's a problem emerges, basically, is what I'm saying. Like all of a sudden you realize your hands are in the wrong position on the piano, or you realize you're getting overwhelmed, or whatever. And that's when you have to suddenly break into a problem-solving aspect, where you quickly resolve the problem and then get back to your usual doing. The usual doing involves using keystone perceptions. Usually the best keystone perception is tone and timing. Pocket, basically. If you focus on those two things, a lot of other things musically take care of themselves. So if you're playing with an appropriate forward flow that doesn't feel too backside, and you're playing with tone, musical materials will basically present themselves coherently. I think the last thing is, if you're doing jazz, don't be afraid to just memorize stuff, because you won't be able to rely on getting into a state where you're in complete flow all the time. But I will say that whatever note you're focused on, the seeds of nextness are right there, and you should only play what you hear. While you're only playing what you hear, you should, if you're a keyboard player of some kind, you should just visualize what notes are kind of the main chord notes, and then you can do whatever you want. As long as you're visualizing what the content is, you can still play sonically whatever you desire, but just knowing the chord will make what you're doing coherent. Again, that just means that the technical knowledge is in the background. The cognition for this stuff is just massively complicated. It's unbelievable. But I hope I can try and represent what that is, because lots of musicians can do things but can't say how they're doing them. So I'm trying to fill in some of that knowledge about the how. What is it in first-person experience? To apprehend the meat. What are the different kinds of cognitive objects that you apprehend phenomenologically and then use to enact? What is the flow of the thinking? It's extremely complicated. It's hard to describe qualia to other people. One way of describing it is that we're always visualizing and we're always using a metaphor. There's a certain sensation you're going to feel in the thinking. And I guess I can only go back to audiation and say that before you do something, you have the audiation and the confidence preloaded, and then you do it. And it's almost like before you move the hands and play on the keyboard, you have it represented in your mind already, and then you have a trust in the body's capability to act it out. It's a very physical mind-body type of knowing. It's so hard to describe that. Most of the time in teaching, you don't even have to describe it. Sometimes it helps to tell a student what to think and just fix their thinking. But other times you can keep it very simple and just let the cognitive qualia reside in the background.